Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. Right, so we are back again with another top 10 list, and this time skill class, which I deem to be currently the third strongest class. That means after this ranking video we do have mystics and science left, and we have to start with the mandatory disclaimers. Now, first and foremost, this list represents the way I see the game, the way I value champions mixed in together with current game relevance and trends, and that is exactly what I am basing the lists on. It's not necessarily who is the best champion on the paper, it's not necessarily who can help you the most in Act 7 or 8 or so on and so forth. It is effectively which are currently the meta, the most demanded, the most used champions, the champions that top-end players chase and rank and actually invest catalysts in to the highest degree, the champions you see most being taken to their max rank status, be that 7-star rank 3, 6-star rank 5 ascended, so on and so forth. The champions that people use when losing matters is the best description here, because you can do tremendous things with every given random champion in story content when, you know, there is effectively no penalty for losing, because you can just pick up one of the 4 other champions on your team and carry on as long as you clear the quest and don't have to revive a bazillion times. There is no penalty for doing poorly in story content or in most of the game modes. There is penalty for doing poorly in Alliance War, in Battlegrounds, and that is effectively what gives champions overall value. A lot of champions have dropped their value because of modes like Alliance War, like Battlegrounds, for instance, APOC. Where APOC is a tremendous champion, one of the best ever made, at the very least on the paper, on their potential and in the amount of matchups and nodes that he can do. But reality is that most of the stuff that APOC does right now is not needed or is not fast enough. And all of that stuff put together right now means that for many top level accounts, APOC is currently sitting as a 6-star rank 3 or 6-star rank 5 unascended and not gonna get ascended. But you guys get the point. Whilst plenty of other champions that are technically lesser, technically more limited, do what needs to be done right now, and therefore they are more popular, more used, and more visible, more present in the game. Here we can see my old skill top 10 list, where I used a bit different ranking system, which was basically effectively what I just described previously, which champions I think are doing the best job mixed with the current game relevance and trends. And Kingpin was at top, Kate Bishop 2nd, Nick Fury 3rd, Valk at that point was smoking hot in spot number 4, Massacre 5th, Mantis 6th, Shang-Chi the 7th, 8th was Black Cat, 9th was Stealth Suit Spider-Man, 10th was Zemo. This list now looks well different, And again, some of these champion rankings are definitely affected by the fact that 7-star version of the champion does or does not exist. For instance, Stealth Suit Spider-Man could potentially be a lot higher or be a lot more relevant if there was a 7-star version of him. For instance, I do think that Mantis might not be as popular if there wouldn't be a 7-star version. You guys get what I mean. That said, let's get to the nitty-bitty gritty and break down the skill class. And the first thing that we're going to notice with the skill class, there is a tremendous amount of very good champions. There aren't as many insanely broken and busted champions. And that's kind of the differentiating factor here. Skill is actually one of my own most ranked classes when it comes to 7 stars going to rank 2 or 6-star rank 5 and ascended, because there are a ton of skill champions that are perfect for situations. And that is to be kept in mind. It's a very diverse class and very full of very good champions, just not necessarily the top of the game level champions, bar a couple. But overall, I think skill class is probably the most balanced class in general, where most of the skill champions, again, have purpose, have use, outside of completely outdated ones. That said, we do need to recognize champions like Aegon, who obviously has a place in the game when it comes to Necropolis or other Everest content. We saw, with the release of Necropolis, Aegon was an immediate rank 5, going there, destroy stuff, or at the very least rank 4. And there is a champion that, again, I initially liked less than I do right now, and that's Baron Zemo. Baron Zemo, like more, but his ranking within the skill. I felt like his ranking within the year 2023 has kind of increased, but at the same time, his ranking in the skill class in particular has kind of decreased. And I know it's a complicated equation there, but it's just because I do think a ton of skill champions have kind of found their home and blossomed at the same time, whilst Baron Zemo also has settled in the contest. And the thing with Baron Zemo is he's not a champion that you rush to rank up. Like, I ranked him up personally begrudgingly, and so do many people. But fact of the matter is, he comes in handy quite often. He's not in my top 10, but he's very, very close to it. And for a reason that he's not a champion I ever want to use daily or a rush to bring in anywhere. He's a champion that ends up being a very solid counter to plenty trouble and problem scenarios. That is the way I see him in the game. Similar role to Ghost currently, similar role to Ronan, where if the occasion asks for it, he's going to do a solid job, both as an attacker or as a defender. Moving on, one champion I already briefly mentioned, previously being Red Hot, and boy, Kabam chilled her. I think Kabam realized what they did with Valkyrie, and ever since then, have kept her in mind, because aside from a couple of metas, last 6 months have been brutal for Valkyrie. Do bring her in like in a couple of wars throughout the season to do some specific matchups on Path 9 on Hazard Shift, and then I do bring her in very rarely in very few metas in Battlegrounds. And I do think the cool off of Valkyrie has quite a lot to do with the fact that Kabam specifically has picked the nodes and designs where she doesn't necessarily incorporate herself the best. And right now she's a tactic attacker, and that's, kind of neat. That's definitely given her a bit more oomph in Alliance Wars. But when it comes to Battlegrounds, this is, for instance, a meta that you could kind of get away with using Valk as well. And she, for a while, was or still is in my deck, but she just isn't the force that she used to be. And she definitely hasn't been over the last 5 or 6 months. I still think she's a tremendous champion. I have her 6-star and 5 ascended. I do think every now and then there will be a time for her to shine. I do think if she was out as 7-star, there might be a chance for her to regain some more ground. But I don't even think that's the main problem. I think the bigger problem is that AI can be absolutely unpredictable these days and doing some magic tricks and pulling off random miracle moves. And then, most of the tough defenders she isn't particularly great against. Obviously, that would mean kind of like Serpent, Onslaught, and Bullseye. She covers none of them right now. And those are, some of the more present threats in the game. She's kind of subpar against Red Skull. You can get away with using her against Red Skull by hitting Red Skull normally and then dropping special in the block, but it's still, not the same. It's kind of tricky and finicky. And she's a great, amazing champion that counters a very large portion of the game, but the current design trends have not been in favor of her. That is not to say that she can't make a return in near future, but at the same time, Kabam starting to release science champions with severe debuffs that she will not be able to cleanse or purify. It's not going to do her any favors. So we're going to see where she goes. She's definitely a champion that I do not regret ranking, that has earned every single one of her catalysts back and then some, but I don't see her as being a chase rank up champion. I don't recommend for too many people to rank her up right now, given choice of some of the champions we're going to talk later. Another champion that I'm sure a lot of people are going to mention is going to be Shang-Chi, and Shang-Chi gets kind of screwed over by quite a few things. Effectively, he's an offensive nuke. The problem is he's just not quite as fast as, let's say, CGR or some of the other offensive nukes. And then his problem is that he also relies on being able to stun for those stuns to land, for his debuffs to land and stick on, for his buffs to be active. And that's a similar set of problems to CGR, but he somehow seems to be dealing with those much better than Shang-Chi is or does. And he's a cool guy. He's a very good champion. I just don't think he's one of the top 10 skills or top 10, chased after champions in the game overall right now. And another champion that I have always described as solid, good, capable is Shield. I still think Shield has decent defensive potential. She is kind of like epitome of a skilled champion in the game right now. Access to dot, access to cleanse, then also tranquility, reducing opponents, debuff accuracy in general. She bypasses unstoppable in similar fashion as Valkyrie, just not as well. And then she can block for days. She's a solid, good champion with her time to shine now and then, but it's not a mainstay. Spot number 10, finally. So this is where we're getting serious. Now, spot number 10, I am gonna give to Moleman. Moleman definitely has gotten himself a resurgence. Ever since he was released in Omega Days, we see tons of Molemans ranked. We see tons of them present. Obviously, he is a tactic attacker and one of the better options for a tactic in Alliance Wars as well, being, frequently banned, but that again kind of speaks about his power right now. With so many people having ranked him up, I do think we're going to keep seeing him for a while because he can be sneakily decent defender as well. And then, obviously, people do underestimate him offensively at this point already. And, fact of the matter is that currently, right now, and since he has been released as a 7-star, which I understand hasn't been that long of time, but Moleman was one of the more frequent rank-up choices. There's tons of rank 2 and rank 3 Molemans out there right now. And you do get to see that, you notice it. And right now, he's doing about as well as he ever was, pretty much. But number 9 is Black Cat. Black Cat's, ever since release, I kind of feel like Black Cat has stayed approximately at that level. She's tremendous for some of the Everest content. She is crazy in the right and correct matchups. And then there are some metas that make her go crazy. Her kind of like one downside is limited defensive capability in addition to being somewhat slow unless she got a right matchup to do. In a generic matchup, she's not that fast or that great. But in any situation where you can actually, ramp her up decently and stop abilities, you are just absolutely rocking. Once she gets that level 2 off and you get some of the big bleeds on the opponent, and once you can pause them, any realistic fight's over. Like, pretty much any fight asks for a level 2 drop and then just pausing the bleeds for a bit and hanging in there, and everything pretty much dies. So there is a ton of value in Black Cat. You do see her around plenty, be that questing Alliance Wars, be that Battlegrounds as well. She does answer a whole bunch of problem matchups also, and then she gets supercharged in some of the metas. She has incredible compatibility with the Black Widow relic, which makes her much more viable in generic and random matchups. And she also has the biggest and best cakes in the game, pretty much, or some of the biggest and best cakes in the game. Just putting it out there, so it's kind of hard to vote against her being in top 10. If you are, you're just not right, or you do not appreciate bakery products. Right, let's move on. Crossbones, spot number 8. Crossbones definitely has had a resurgence right now, especially among the more skilled player base, but partially driven by some specific content creators, I'm sure. But there is no question again that Crossbones has gotten a lot of love. Also, the fact that Crossbones now counters some of the more annoying defenders in Photon, and you can also use Crossbones for things, and his ability accuracy reduction is just being superbly helpful in general. If you can get your Crossbones high sig, his debuff purification is also extremely helpful because Kabam seems to be falling more and more in love with applying a whole bunch of random debuffs at you, and Crossbones not just kind of like stops them debuffs but converts them into more damage. And he can be ridiculously fast nuke as well. So some people might think this is undeserved or slightly too high, but without a doubt, I see my fair share of Crossbones around the game pretty much everywhere now, and there is no denying the fact that he has had a fairly significant resurgence. Move on to spot number 7. Spot number 7 is Massacre. Massacre, again, previously was in spot number 5, just behind Valkyrie. I do think he has taken a slide back. Again, that is largely due to the nature of the metas. That is largely due to the nature of the defenders that are being released. He's not necessarily countering all of the most popular defenders, but fact of the matter remains that he's an absolute nuke that can take a huge variety of champions by delivering damage in a fairly exclusive manner. And when I say exclusive, obviously there are more champions that do a ton of damage through the block, but it's a small club. It's fairly rare. And the fact that he can access a defensive ability accuracy reduction to a decent degree with his Disorients and his Bat Ignited hitting the block, the fact that he can, put on a ton of damage over time, debuffs with Incinerate and Bleeds with his level 1 spam, and then can have this massive burst level 2. It's tremendously helpful. It's just no way around it. Also, he is the most picked option, as we found out from the CCP challenge selectors. So it means that now there is a guaranteed RNG less or RNG free way how to acquire Massacre, and that incredibly obviously has helped his popularity, because everybody who is sweating hard enough and trying hard enough to do the CCP challenges, and I know that a large portion of the players haven't done them or don't plan to do them, but basically anybody who wants to can have this champion as 7-star if you are committed enough to it. And of those people who are sweaty enough, who are trying hard enough, majority seem to have picked Massacre and ranked him up, and are also now reaping the benefits in using him. As I mentioned before, some of the metas have not necessarily been the friendliest to Massacre, so there is some of the things that have been hindering Valkyrie in remaining in top 10, also slowing down Massacre. But there's one big difference in between Valkyrie and Massacre, and is that Valkyrie also needs to rely on her buffs and how her buffs stick, and Massacre doesn't. And that's kind of like the big difference, I feel like, in addition to the fact that he also has, dot damage and a few other things. But right now, his kit's just working better than Valkyrie's is, period. Maybe not in this one specific meta, because Valkyrie is a better champion, I guess, in this Rich Get Richer meta. But overall, Kabam has been on a hate for buffs. Cosmic class has suffered for it quite greatly, and Valkyrie was just catching strays, many of whom Massacre avoided. So that's why he is still in top 10, but still has lost a little bit of placement, because the next champion has just been more demanding, and that is Mantis. Now, with Mantis, obviously, the two things that are super important is that she shuts off any science debuffs, basically, as you are attacking her, and that is super important for like Photon matchup, which has been absolutely big for her. Photon matchup alone is, for instance, one of the reasons why I took mine to rank 2 and included her in my decks in most of the metas. And every other meta, I'm thinking I'm fine, and then I realize I need some, fast Photon counter, and then she goes back in. So that is a big part of her popularity. Existence of Photon has been a big part of her popularity, but obviously other skill defenders, other science defenders that she takes is super useful. In addition to all of that, she can also be a solid defender that can fail people's parries, which is quite a big deal, that can catch people off guard and often results in taking them some chip damage. And then on top of it all, virtually no science champion can kill her effectively. So if opponents only left with like a couple of science champions after the placements, then you can also trap people with Mantis, which gives her extra value. And similarly in Alliance War, she is one of those champions that can take a multitude of fights and unlock, new options for dealing with some nodes. For instance, if opponent has placed science champions on Hazard Shift, she can completely shut down Hazard Shift. And I think for multitude of reasons, Mantis has just been incredibly popular. The one thing that is holding her back right now, I do feel like, is the instability of AI. Which can be quite frustrating to use her, especially if you're not tremendously confident with her. Therefore, one of the unfortunate bits of feedback I have heard from people is that, they do struggle to use her until they get comfortable with her. But for the most part, she's super simple. Get to level 2, charge a heavy, nuke, done. And she just does right now what needs to be done. And that I actually had her just below Massacre, but I do think that she at the moment fulfills more important roles and matchups in the game. And is also tremendously fast, which again is one of the things that does keep her relevant. And now, for spot number five, I'm cheating. For spot number 5, I'm cheating harder than I have ever cheated. But there's a very, very good reason for this. Spot number 5 is going to go not 1, not 2, but 3 champions at the same time. And there's exactly kind of the same argumentation for every single one of them being somewhere in the top 10. The reason why I didn't want to separate them, because I could have easily made them champions 5, 6, and 7, is because number 1, I wanted to accent more skilled champions, because there are a ton of really good ones. Number 2, all 3 of them kind of fulfilled the same role, like to the letter. And that also is one of the things that does make skill class kind of unique. We're talking about Killmonger, Korg, and Attuma. Each and every single one of these is present in the game at the highest levels of the game, both in Alliance War and in Battlegrounds. Each and every single one of them is like 95% defender. You can use Killmonger in attack, but realistically he's slow. You can use Korg in attack in some sciencey matches, but realistically he's going to be quite slow. You can use Attuma in matches where you can fight freely and ramp him up. He's going to be faster than the other 2 probably, but he's still like 90% defender. And every single one of them gets ranked for the simple and same reason. You need a defender. And all 3 of them are good. And typically when people choose who they're going to rank up, largely just depends on which one you have duped or which one has high sig. In my case, I ended up taking Attuma to rank 3, but it could have easily been Killmonger or Korg. And the reason I picked Attuma is because we didn't have one in our battle group, and I really didn't see much of a difference in between ranking up Korg or Attuma. And I might as well just go for something that's not redundant to the battle group. I know for a fact, eventually I'm going to take all 3 of them up, unless one of them completely falls by the wayside. Each one of them has their slight positives and slight downsides. So, for instance, in case of Killmonger, I do feel like he probably has less great counters than, that can shut him down completely. But the problem is that CGR is superly popular, and a handful of other champions that completely run through him. Because get an armor break on him and he's completely neutered. On the plus side for Killmonger is he's one of those champions that's harder to fight than Attuma, arguably harder to fight than Korg. You can make a very easy slip up, hit his block, get counter punched. He's indestructible, can be good to draw at some fights, and unless opponents have good counter, the fight's always gonna drag and be very long. So that can force errors too. His power gain kind of eliminates some matchups that otherwise would be viable. He's very, very solid defender, and in a pinch you can use him in some offensive matchups too. I have done that in past. Not the best, not the fastest, but arguably, better attacker than Korg. I think Korg is overall the best defender here. Overall, even though everybody and their mother at this point knows how to fight Korg, there are very few champions that actually run through Korg. He's kind of better at, stalling opponents with his crit resistance, with his damage reduction of rock stacks, with opponents having to line things up. It's not always super easy. Even in this meta where Bishop's doing great, I have had some fairly, messy fights against Korg just because, I need to drop off my special because I'm getting too much power, and then I can't line up my level 2 with his rock stacks being down, and then I need to build it all up again. And it can be a mess. And I think overall Korg's probably the most consistent stall defender at this point. I don't think he's catching too many people and completely wrecking them that often. But, people are going to take their time with Korg most of the time. They're going to have some good or pseudo-good counter for him. Everybody, is getting better with light intercepting. But he still always takes his time, and there's still value with his kit. The weakest attacker of the 3 for sure. Then there's Attuma, a champion that almost always or practically always exacts a health cost out of your opponents. Because you can use just about anybody against Attuma. It's just they're going to lose a lot of health, and you're going to win matches because of it for the most part. But at the same time, He does have counters who bypass that completely. Luckily for the two, those counters are typically fairly slow. They really are. Like, you can just about always outpace Negasonic Teenage Warhead. You can just about always outpace Shuri if you have somewhat decent matchup. And then, if opponent is using a nuke option, they might nuke him super fast because he's arguably the easiest to fight against. But at the same time, all of those champions who can nuke him take damage. So, again, I don't see that much difference in the function that they serve or in the value that they have. That's why I placed all of them in 5, because that's also where I feel they are somewhere on the list. Because I think it is more important to have at least one of these 3 champions ranked than most of the champions below this list for majority of the, players who are chasing competitive play and active play, or players who are looking for a defender. But I do think that the top 4 champions are even more important to rank. Like, if your option would be rank up Korg or any of the other 4 champions up top, you'd pick any of the other 4. And in spot number 4, I have Bullseye. He's like one of the second best champion released this year. Absolute bullshit of a champion. Cancer in this game. Wish he was never added. Stupid design. But he works. And he is the best skill defender right now. He, is sought after, is chased, is immediately ranked. If I got myself a Bullseye, straight to rank 3. My 6-star rank 5 is ascended. Bullseye is in majority of the Battlegrounds decks, more often than Korgatuma or Killmonger, even though they are extremely present as well. But, if you have a choice to make, you're probably going to add Bullseye in most instances. That he's offensively all right. Can be used defensively, obviously, needless to say, not the best attacker, but still better than Korg and a 2-man Killmonger in attack, so he beats them in that area as well. And, just one of those champions in this game that you kind of have to have if you want to be competitive and fight against, competitive players. That is what gives him value. Now the top 3 actually kind of remains unchanged with one slight, alteration. Nick Fury. Nick Fury's value, I do feel like, kind of has gone down slightly. Previously, I felt like top 3 skill champions were here, and the rest was here. Then I feel like now we have the top skill champion, top 2 skill champions, and basically right next to the Bullseye and everything else. So, reason for it is because there's no 7-star Nick Fury, and 6-star Nick Furies are becoming easier and quicker to nuke down. Thing that obviously does still give Nick Fury a value is because he's still a staple in Battlegrounds defense. He still can do solidly on offense as well. In the right matchups, being fast enough even without having the life model decoy destroyed. People have gotten better at using Nick Fury by or whilst destroying his life model decoy to finish the fights with full health and nuking down bullseyes and stuff like that. So that's a piece of utility that he still has. And he's still a staple defender in Alliance War. He's still a staple defender in Battlegrounds, staple attacker in Alliance War as well. People do bring in Nick Fury for the extra safety, knowing that even if they, mess the fight up and die, they're not gonna actually die and give a death away in Alliance War. And he's still absolutely one of those stable champions, in pretty much every deck. Maybe at this point I'd put Bullseye above him, but that's really debatable. I still kind of feel like Nick Fury does deserve his 3rd spot. But that will change, inevitably. If he does not get released as a 7-star, that will change. The funny thing is that the same goes for the other top 2 champions. Skill class also has a similar problem as Cosmic class, I suppose, where neither one of the top 3 champions in that class exists as 7-stars. And Nick Fury, I feel like, experienced that problem a lot, because part of his function was stall. Go on to Kingpin, there's not much to talk about. He's great, he's amazing, puts in a ton of work everywhere across the game, and he's also kind of on the retreat right now. Not quite fast enough with the current tempo of Battlegrounds. Offensively, there are more options for him defensively, and he's taken a step back in Battlegrounds, for sure, unless the right meta comes along. Overall, though, the entire game still absolutely gets destroyed by Kingpin. Be that questing scenarios, be that Alliance War, And he still brings in value again, more secluded in the amount of metas that he can take, or people do bring him in. Is not a automatic add-in in any Valorant's deck at the moment, I feel like. But I do feel like, again, he has one of the largest contributions overall, the pretty much exact on the game as a whole. Because every single game mode he does very well at. Every single game mode you can use him. Every single game mode he has functions and he has, abilities that do work, and he's an option. And if you do not see or hear too much about him right now, again, a very big part of the reason is that pretty much everybody who has Kingpin has ranked him up and is enjoying him, and he still does work, just not as dominant as it once was. If he gets released as a 7-star, I'm sure we can see more and more and more and more of Kingpin. If he does not, similarly as Nick, I'm sure we can see less and less and less and less and less of them. This was a list where I actually could have, significantly downgraded both Kingpin and Nick, but I do still feel like they deserve to be up there for now. But everybody who is in top 0.0001%, I still think Nick and Kingpin are deserving of these positions. And the top skill is quite easy. Also doesn't exist as a 7-star, unfortunately, but Kate Bishop is the best skill champion. She's incredibly versatile offensive champion. It's kind of unreal how good she is offensively. Because she's fast enough for Battlegrounds. She's obviously capable enough for any other game mode. Her damage delivery method is fairly rare, so hardly anything is immune to it or bypass it, because it's Cold Snap, one of the rarest damage over time debuffs that we have from the more generic ones, and at the same time, it's passive, so it can't get tricked off. In addition to that, she scales incredibly well with any attack modifiers, and she also can ramp her damage up and maintain it consistent throughout the entire fight, which makes her great for Everest and longer form content. She has very little to no defensive use, unlike Kingpin and Nick Fury and Bullseye and Corgan and Two-Man, Killmonger, and so on and so forth. But she is ultimately, I think, top 3 offensive champion in the game overall. I don't think there are 3 better purely offensive champions in the game. Just because of how many matchups she does against, how many nodes she works, how fast she works, how straightforward it is to use her. The fact that she still does great against a ton of newer and more annoying matchups that we see all the time, pretty much everywhere. And AI manipulation is up there, and Kate's the best skill. It is. Again, she is not affected as much by not being out as a 7-star, but it is going to start to catch up to her. I don't think the 7-star rank 3 barrier too hard for her to climb. When we're going to have 7-star rank 4s, then it's going to be like a big factor. Or if everything else in the deck is going to be 7-star rank 3s, I still think Kate will have a place in it. Because she's one of the champions that's very good at ignoring power level difference. Because of the way she distributes damage, because of the way how she, can hit block, bait out specials, and have the passive parry stun without taking chip damage. Very, very good at a lot of stuff like that. And ultimately, yeah, Kate's just fucking awesome. Right, that's it for the skill list. I have explained exactly why I play, who I placed where and why. So, Kate Bishop up top, Kingpin, Nick Fury, Bullseye, Corgitum, Killmonger, Mantis, Massacre, Crossbones, Black Cat, Moleman. Special shoutouts given to Valkyrie, Shang-Chi, Chilth, and Baron Zemo. I'm going to catch you guys soon with the Mystic list. Bye-bye. Hello there, guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about the